Well, welcome everyone. I'm Diane McKeever, and today we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, Excel. Actually, anything about Excel, and I get excited about it. I hope you do too. I think it's going to be a wonderful webinar, and we've got a nice number of participants, and we'll get through this. I usually teach this in an hour and a half. So I'm going to be teaching it in 45 minutes today. I may talk a little faster, but I'm going to try and modulate that so that I don't lose any of you. So because this is a demonstration, typically I wouldn't have slides, but I have put together slides of the most important points that I'm talking about. So there's about, I don't know, 20 or so slides that are talking about various concepts. And you will get this PDF of the slides when you get the link to the video. And I have, in fact, started the camera. So you should be getting a link to the video in the next day or two. So before I get started with my webinar, I need to do a little business. What is SCORE? This is being brought to you by the Minnesota chapter of SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide nonprofit organization that's an independent resource partner of the SBA, the Small Business Administration. The organization was started more than 50 years ago. And right now there are over 300 chapters with 10,000 volunteers. We offer free, confidential business mentoring. That's what we do all day, every day. I have about 27 active clients, 28 maybe, and I meet with them all the time and walk them through the process to make them as successful as they possibly can be. Our chapter has nearly 90 volunteers waiting to serve you, to help you on your business way. Our chapter has recently been designated as a chapter of the year, and we hope to get that designation again this year. Since its founding, SCORE has helped over 11 million clients, and we can help you literally in all phases of your business, whether you're thinking about starting or whether you are in the startup phase, you are ready to pull the trigger and start, or you want to just grow your business, or lastly, you want to sell or close, or the alternative, buy. We actually have a team who can help you determine value and help you get the best from that transaction. We encourage you to visit our website. Oops, we have a brand new website, and this will work, the minnesota.score.org. I should have fixed that. We now have a new website, and it's called score.org/Minnesota. So it's basically very similar. This will work for a while. There you can request a mentor, you can look at mentor profiles, you can look at our workshops, and you can search online for anything that's available. Lastly, I want to thank our sponsors and our community partners. These are the folks that assist us, some financially and some with information, to help you get the best out of your business. So without further ado, did I say I'm Diane McKeever? Well, I am, and I'm happy to be here with you. I'm flying solo today, so as a result, I would like it if you would put your questions in the chat. I normally ask you to put them in the Q&A, but I can't monitor the chat and the Q&A at the same time. So let's see if you could put them in the chat. And maybe hold off on your questions a little bit, because there's some possibility that I may answer your question before throughout the presentation. So I am going to stop sharing this, and I am going to start sharing this. Okay, so somebody let me know, do you see an Excel document? If somebody could just write and say, yes, perfect. Thank you, Tanya. Okay, Monica sees it too. So I'm thinking if Tanya and Monica see it, then it's great. Oh, Brian, why did you raise your hand? Goodness, I don't really have the ability at this point to do that. So if you have a question, put it in the chat and I can see it. Okay, so when we're talking about pivot tables, of course, we're talking about data. And where do you get this data from? Well, you know, your point of sale system, maybe you've exported it from that. Maybe you've exported it from your QuickBooks account or whatever accounting system you're using. And it comes in as a CSV, typically, comma separated value file. And it looks like this. It comes in looking pretty ugly, fixed with columns. And so we get, you know, these pound signs, which, you know, means that the column isn't wide enough to display the information. We get these crazy designations. And so the first thing we need to do is fix this file. There's no way that we can make a pivot table from bad data. So let's start by fixing this file. So I'm going to select the whole worksheet. And you may know, if you took my last webinar, you may know that if you click in the upper left corner of your screen, just above the number and to the left of the letter, that when you click there, you've got your whole worksheet selected. And then I'm going to move my mouse to the vertical line that separates any of the columns, and I'm going to double click. That's probably the best way for us to, change the width of the columns, because what it does is it looks at all the data in the column, and you might not have said, well, I really need B column to be this wide. You may have said, well, I only need it to be this wide because that's as wide as it looks like, but there may be longer names that you can't see. So that's the best way to change the width of the column. So I'm going to quickly go up to the top of my screen, and you know that that's Control or Command and the Home key that will get me to the top. I always like to do a little bit of formatting on my column headings before I get started. And so I'm going to select row 1 by clicking on the number 1, and I'll probably make these a little bit fancier. I might make them centered and bold. That just helps to tell Excel that, in fact, these are column headings. And the other thing that I like to do is I like to wrap text. The reason that I like to wrap text is that there is some school of thought that says that you should put the headings of columns on multiple rows, and this really doesn't work well. And also, I don't necessarily want to have really wide columns when the column heading is kind of wide, long. So I'm going to, on my Home tab, go to the alignment group, and here's a lovely wrap text. And you see that now I'm able in these columns to change the width of the columns. I haven't compromised my titles. When you're working with pivot tables, it's especially important that you don't use this old system of saying yearly sales and quarterly sales, because if you use this and you go into your pivot tables, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see, oh, wait, I have 2 columns that are called sales. That's not true. One of them is quarterly and one of them is yearly. But you know what? The pivot table is only going to take the information from 1 row. So if you have it in 2 rows, you're going to have an issue. So have a nice long title if you want, but instead of putting it in 2 separate cells like this, just put in your quarterly. So I misspelled quarterly. Okay, and wrap it and change the column width, and there you go. Okay, double click in a cell to edit it, and there we go. So now you can see how lovely that is. What happens if you have a merged row or merged column? Yeah, you can still have it wrapped. That's not a problem. That was somebody from, oh, S has ask that question. Okay, I'm going to actually delete that information because we don't need it. So the other thing that you should do before you do your pivot table is to look at the data that you have. Oh, goodness, frog came in here. Look at the data that you have and see, so is this the kind of information that I want to analyze? Do I need anything else? Always make a copy too. Okay, yeah. Well, you know, Kevin, he's saying that he always makes a copy of his file too, in case he makes a mistake. And that's a good idea. Also, when you bring in your data, remember I said it's a CSV or comma separated value. It's always a good idea to do a save as and make sure that it's saved as a workbook as opposed to a comma separated value. You may be surprised if you don't do that some of your changes may not actually hold because they're not supported in a CSV. So as a result, you might want to do it for that purpose too. Okay, as you know, when you're scrolling left and right and top and bottom, you're going to be losing some of the information. So if I wanted to be looking at, let's say, the region and the country, when I scroll over, one of the things that I might want to do is freeze the panes so that I can see A and B columns. I also want to freeze the first row so that as I scroll on down, I can see what we're talking about. So both of these are accomplished in the View tab. And in the View tab, we have freeze panes, the View tab, freeze panes. And freezing panes is really important because when you do that, you're telling Excel, I want some sections of my worksheet frozen in place so that I can then scroll around and still see headings. Now, a few years ago, they added freeze the top row and freeze the first column because these are very popular. But they've always had this guy, and this guy is really probably even more powerful because in this case, I want to freeze two columns, don't I? I want to freeze A and B, and I also want to freeze the first row. So I can choose this, keep rows and columns visible while the rest of the worksheet scrolls. Now, look at what it says, based on the current selection, So do you see that this cell C2 is my current selection? So when I freeze panes, everything to the left of that is going to be frozen in place. Oh, look at that. So when I'm looking all the way over here, I know which region and countries I'm working with. And it's also the first row is frozen in place. So as I scroll on down, I can still see that. Please send copy. Okay, Rosetta, everyone's going to get a copy of the presentation and the slides. So everyone will do that. You don't need to ask for it. Okay, very nice. Yes, that is nice, Kevin. Now, one thing I might want to do is I might actually want to calculate how long did it take. We know how long somebody ordered something and we know when it was shipped, but you know, when you're trying to do your analysis, you might want to say, well, what was the elapsed time on this? So I think before I do my pivot table analysis, and this is really an important part, you may say, we're not talking about pivot tables yet. And that's true, because if your data isn't good, then you're not going to have a good pivot table. So let's say that we wanted to find out what the elapsed time is. So I have right-clicked on the letter H, and I'm inserting a new column. I'll put in a nice title here, elapsed time. Oh, look how it wraps, because I had selected the whole row and everything is wrapping very nicely for me. And you can probably figure out what this formula is going to be. This is not a hard one. I'm going to just say it equals this. I like, after I type the equal sign, to click on cells, because then my fickle fingers don't have to get in the way and say, what is this? G2, da, da. Okay. And from that, I'm going to subtract, and then I can click on F2 and it color codes them for me in case I'm not sure which cells I'm talking about. That looks perfect. So I'm going to enter that. And believe it or not, that is exactly what I want. That is the answer that I want, except that it's in the wrong format, isn't it? Because when we insert new columns, they always inherit the format of the column to the left. Column to the left is a date. This is a date. And you might wonder, well, how did it get February 11th, 1900? Well, according to Microsoft, and they know everything, according to Microsoft, the world began January 1st, 1900. So whatever this date is, it looks like it's about, I don't know, 40 days have elapsed, 41 days maybe have elapsed. And so this is 41 days into that year of 1900. So what we're going to have to do is, of course, we're going to go to the Home tab. It's there, it's formatted there. You can see in the number group, it's formatted there as a date. And I need to change that. I could make it a number, or I'm just going to make it general. That's fine. Either a general or a number doesn't make any difference. And then I need to fill this down. It is being recorded, Stephen. Am I talking too fast? I encourage you to take notes, however. I'm here to tell you, I'm encouraging you to take notes because there could be some things I'm talking about that will not be in the handout. They will definitely be in the recording, of course. So I'm going to fill this down. And if you came to my last webinar, that if I put my mouse on this little box in the corner, and it has a little bit different representation on the Mac, but there is one. But if I put my mouse on it, this is actually on what's called the fill handle, And I'm going to double click on the fill handle, and you see that it's taken that formula and it has filled it down. If I wanted to really check, I could do my control and my down arrow, and I get down to row 100, and sure enough, it's here waiting for me. Or I could do control up arrow, and it brings me back up. Oh, it didn't. It brings me back up to the top. I'll go home, control home. And I'm back up to the top of my screen. So now we've got the elapsed time. I can change that column width to make it a little bit shorter now. Anything else that I might want to do, I should be doing that now. I might want to concatenate some fields. You may remember concatenate is joining fields information together, so that if, for instance, I wanted to create a field that added the item type and the sales channel, so that this now becomes one label, I could do that. Okay, I'm going to, actually what I'm going to do is I have bookmarked a couple of things. One is next week, we are going to have an amazing presentation. Well, I'm going to give an amazing presentation on 15 mind-blowing Excel tips. Sadly, that now is up to 20, but I haven't changed the label. If you're interested in signing up for that and you haven't done so already, there's the link in the chat. And the other link is using Excel to analyze your data. That's a webinar I gave a couple of weeks ago, and I would encourage you to go back and look at that because it's going to be more on analyzing data than on pivot tables, though it did touch on it just a little bit. So it is very strongly recommended that that before you put in a pivot table, that you actually insert this information into a table, not a pivot table, but just a basic Excel table. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So I've gone to the Insert tab, and I've gone to Table, not Pivot Table, just Table. And it says, it's asking where the data from my, the data is for my table. And those of you who know about absolute references, you can see in this window that it's put in A1 through 101. It's put it in as an absolute reference because that's what the dollar signs are talking about, right? Also, my table has headers. That's an important aspect too. And I'll tell you the significance of this in just a moment, but I'm going to click on OK. And as a result, our table has changed considerably. It looks different than it did before. It still has my freezing panes applied. I could remove those now because, in fact, the first row will now remain as a stationary item. And it has brought in all of this lovely color. If you don't like this lovely color, you can see that there's a table design tab now because we're in a table. And from that, one of your options is that you want just a plain old table, that you don't need all of these crazy colors added to it. So that's a personal preference. I'm not keen on all of those alternating colors. But look at what it has done for us. It has given us, did I hit the enter key on this? Did you guys get that? No, I didn't. Okay. I just sent off that chat to you all. You can see that at the top of every column, we now have one of these pull down arrows. And it may be, depending upon your need for the analysis of your information, it could be that this table is going to be just fine because we can sort and we can filter using the table features that are now available to us. If we only wanted to see a couple of regions, we would have the opportunity to click those regions. If we wanted to sort by country, we could do that. So, you know, a lot of this is a possibility that it is now going to work very nicely for you just simply by having a table. So keep that in mind. But the real reason that it's really important is that, oddly enough, pivot tables are created without formulas. I always think it's pretty magical. Not sure why they're not created. I really don't understand how they're created, quite frankly. They're just kind of a miracle thing that Microsoft has done for us, but they're not based upon formulas. And they are based upon the area that you designate initially, the columns and rows that you designate initially. If you add new columns or you add new rows to that area, that data is not then available. You would have to go in, and it is possible for you to go in and reset the area. It's just kind of a hassle. But if you set it as a table and insert new rows or new columns, those new rows and columns are integrated into the new table name. Actually, it's called a name. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the upper left corner of your worksheet is something called the name box. It tells you typically the name of the active cell, because you know that every single cell has a unique name made up of the column that it's in and the row that it's in. So it's B4, G27. I sound like I'm calling bingo numbers, which we do. We play bingo, so that's why it sounded familiar. But also you can name cells in your worksheet. And so table 1 is a name that was actually created the moment you inserted this table into your worksheet. So what is being used by the pivot table that we're going to create in a moment, it's using table 1, however that's defined. And if we add new columns or new rows, table 1 expands automatically to do that. Do the new rows and columns need to be in the middle? No. Nope, they can be at the end. Good question, Alan, because there are situations like in formulas, Alan may be familiar with. If you add a new row in the middle of a formula, the formula will expand. If you add it at the bottom of a formula, it doesn't get included. So that may be what Alan is referring to. But no, you can add your new rows and columns anywhere in the table and it will be included. Okay, so we've done, kind of enough information so far with our pivot table, and we are ready to go to a pivot table. So again, I'm going to hit the insert, and instead of table, I'm going to go to pivot table, insert pivot table. This is what you've all been waiting for. So this will make sense to you now, won't it? Select the table or range, and it's saying it's coming from table 1. See, that's that named range that we're talking about. I'm going to talk about named ranges next week because they're very powerful and nobody uses them. I don't know what the heck. And where do we want our pivot table? Definitely on a new worksheet, unless we happen to have an existing worksheet that we want it to go on to. But we're going to say we'd like it on a new worksheet. And when we click on OK, that's exactly what we get, is a new worksheet. I like to label my worksheet. Oh, sorry. Let's see. Apparently my picture is in the way. Kimberly, is that better? Let me know. I moved it, so let me know if that works. So here's my pivot table, and it's on a new sheet, cleverly called sheet 1. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to call this pivot table. You could call it sales table, you could call it whatever it is that you want. Okay, that apparently didn't help. You have to minimize your picture on the screen. Hide thumbnail video. Maybe that would do it for you. Okay. All right, so we have two very important things here. We have a pivot table fields, and we have our pivot table area. And our pivot table fields will display all of the fields, all of the columns that we have. Here's that elapsed time that we had created. And you'll see that down at the bottom, we have 4 areas. We have a filter that we could be inserting. We have the columns area where any field that's moved into this is going to be displayed in the columns. We have the row area where, of course, if we move a field down here, it will be displayed in the row. And then the values is what we're actually calculating. Okay, so there are checkboxes here, and it is possible for you to just click the checkbox and a field will appear in where Microsoft feels it should. I never like to trust Microsoft on these things, so I always take my fields and I drag them into the area that I'd like to see. So I'll start with region, and then I'll go to country, and look what's happening in my pivot table area. The pivot table is being constructed based upon the fields that I'm adding and where I am dropping them. So maybe I would want to have item type. And I'll put that in perhaps the column area. So you can see that my columns now have the products that we sell. And then what is it that you're trying to analyze? Well, maybe we want to find out the number of units sold. So we're going to move units sold down to the value area. And now we have our pivot table. And remember, I was saying that there are no formulas. If I click on any number on this, it's going to show on the formula bar, that's a number. And so as a result, that's why if you change information, you're going to have to refresh your worksheet because it doesn't actually automatically update. If I were to go back and make so here's clothes in Bangladesh. Let's see if I can find where Bangladesh, here's Bangladesh and clothes. And if I were to make a change to this, instead of it being 8,200, I'm going to make it 82,000. If I come back to my pivot table sheet, oh, it hasn't changed, right? Because it isn't based on a formula. So whenever you are going to be changing a number in your data, you always want to come back here and right click and say refresh. And you can see how that number has refreshed itself. When you dropped item type into columns, we got a lot of detailed columns. How did that work? When I dropped item type into columns, we got a lot of columns, detail columns. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Don. We got a column for each item that we are selling, I think is what I can tell you, unless you further clarify that question. So, you know, what can we do? We can format all of these guys, right? It's kind of hard. I find looking at numbers that don't have commas to be very difficult. I'm probably anal that way. So I've selected all of my columns of numbers. And in fact, these are really not dollar signs, so I don't need the decimal places. So I'm going to decrease the number of decimals, and I got some nice columns of information. I can change the column labels because this just says column labels. So instead I can put in products. And it is the sum of the units sold. Okay, part of what I'm doing here is trying to figure out what they do and what they're good for. Okay. Okay. Ah, look at you talking to one another. Very nice. Okay, you can keep me out of this conversation. That's fine. So this pivot table fields area is very important, isn't it? Because it helps us to design the information that we're looking at. Now you'll notice that because we have a region and a country, the understanding is that the region is going to be the primary sort, and then within that, we're going to have the countries. It may be that you'd actually just like to see the countries and not the regions. So, or the regions and not the countries, I should say. So if I click this little minus next to Asia, you can see that it has collapsed. Did it do that? Why did it not feel like it did that? Oh. Okay. Okay. My arrow keeps changing and not allowing me. There it goes. There it goes. Okay. It's trying to select a whole row and I don't want it to do that. So let's see if I can sneak up on this. Okay, well, I was able to do it for Australia, but you should be able to click on these. These are called outlines. And again, we get, if you take the class next week, we'll talk about outlines and how we can collapse information and so forth. You can see that I've got region first and country second when I'm here in my pivot table field box. If I accidentally put these in the wrong order, my pivot table goes crazy, right? Because it now has a break after each country. And so all I have to do is reorder these. Very easy to do that. You'll also see that we have the sum of the units sold. Perhaps I wasn't interested in the sum. Maybe I was interested in this as an average. Again, I'm coming over here to my pivot table fields, and I can choose value field settings. And this allows me to say, well, I want a count of them, an average of them, a max, a min, a product. These are all of the popular numbers, number formats, and you can see that now we're looking at the average of the units sold as opposed to the sum of the units sold. Okay, we've got pull down menus here and next to the row labels. That is going to allow me to filter the information very easily. I can click on this products, for instance, and it lists all of the unique products. If I don't care to see some of these products, I can filter them out. This is the same filter that we saw just a moment ago when we were talking about the table. Suppose you're looking at this information and you're saying to yourself, well, I would be interested in seeing the individual records that are in my database that are used to create this number, whatever number that is. Maybe there's a number on here that you feel is kind of an anomaly. If you put your mouse on any number and double click on it, you will actually get a new sheet in your book. This is a brand new sheet in your book. It's called Sheet 2, and it has extracted from your main data, it has extracted those records that make up this particular aspect of your sales, of your data. And so you would now be able to do whatever it was that you wanted to see. What were you looking for when you were doing that? You can see that they inserted it into a table because of the ever popular alternating colors. So I'm going to go back to my pivot table. If I had a table like this, and I think I'm going to actually remove this unit sold and put in something else. I'm actually going to put in a date here. Yeah, okay. I am going to have an order date and put it in the columns. Because maybe I'll also put in the unit sold as my value. Look what happens when you put in a column of date. Now, we did not spend time going through. Oh, I'm so lost. Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. It's good to score offer any one-on-one instruction. If you ask for me as a mentor, I'm sure I could help you if you're from the area. But look what happens when you put in dates. We did not spend time in our data parsing out the dates into a day, a month, a year, which we could have done, and it might work, it might be a good idea to do that because you might want to be able to just see in your data file just certain years, and you'd be able to do that with less gracefully by a formula or a filter. But what we're trying to do is, oh, don't you know the phone has to ring? Jiminy. Okay. But look what the pivot table has done. If you look in your pivot table field, we only have a year, we only have a date in here, yet it parsed it out all by itself into years, quarters, months. And so we talked about these little plus signs for expanding and collapsing. So if we wanted to see the, okay, so that means that I can expand these guys, and I don't know why I'm having such trouble expanding them. There we go. Okay, so do you see that all by itself? Microsoft said, oh yeah, okay, this is Q1 date, Q2, Q3, Q4. And so we would be able to expand or collapse these guys and see specific quarters, specific years, and so forth. It really is quite remarkable that it's able to do this. And this is a relatively new thing. The thing about Microsoft and Excel is that it's changing all the time. All the time. It's just amazing. They're coming out with new formulas all the time. I just got a notice that they have a new ifs function. And you probably, if you've used Excel before, you know that they always had an if function, and it was always a drama if you wanted to do nested if statements, but now they've got a whole function, IFS, and it allows you to do nested if statements very nicely. So this has parsed out our date into these different aspects of it. Okay, suppose you wanted this information displayed as it is, but you might also like to have this information displayed in a different way. What I have just done is copy and pasted, and now as a second table below or next to, wherever you want to have it, kind of away from it a little bit, you're able to say, okay, this particular table, I'm not going to have the order date. So let me turn off the order date and the years. Let me delete that. Remove, and put something else in here. Again, I'll go back to maybe my sales channel. And so now I have a second table on my sheet that has the same information, but displayed in a different name, in a different way. Now, you'll notice that, oh, what happened to that handy dandy table of fields that I had here a moment ago? Well, do not despair. It is still available, but it's just that if my active cell, and you see where my active cell is over here, if my active cell is not in a pivot table, I don't get my pivot table fields. So that's an important thing to not panic. Do not panic. Okay, I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to go back up to this guy because there's something really neat about timelines. If you want to analyze your information, you can insert a timeline, and it's a timeline for order date because that's the field that we're using. And you can see that you have a new little window here. And if you highlight some cells in this little timeline window, whoa, did you see what happened? My pivot table is now just displaying the information for that time period. This is really great. This is a new addition, you know, new in the last 20 years. And so as a result, you can see how powerful this is. So it has gone all the way from our very first order in 17. And if we highlight, we can see just these months in 17. Could we have created a filter to do this? You betcha, you betcha. But that would have taken a lot more work for us to do. Okay. Couple more things, because I can't even believe it. 45 minutes have passed. I wanted to show you that you could very easily insert a chart, because numbers are one thing. Charts are really great though, because they help us visualize what's going on. So we're going to insert again, and we're going to insert a chart. I kind of like columnar charts. 3D are my favorite. And so this chart is displaying what's going on the pivot table. If I change the date range, well, that wasn't a good date range. If I change the date range, my chart automatically changes. Isn't that amazing? So the chart will always mimic what's on the pivot table. And if you change what's on the chart, if I were to remove any of these, maybe I want to remove the country. I won't have any. Okay. I'm not going to do that right now, clearly. But if I were to change the country or remove it from here, it would actually remove it from my pivot table. Trust me on that. I often like to have charts, but in this way, you can see how cramped it is. I usually like to have a chart on its own sheet. I don't mind moving back and forth between sheets, and I'll show you, I hope, if I have time, in a half a second, I'll show you how you can see both of these, even though they're on different sheets. So I've right-clicked on the chart, and I'm going to move the chart to a new sheet. I'll call it pivot chart. I think I misspelled that, but there you go. Got an 8 in there for some reason. And now that's on its own sheet, and you can really see how nice that is. Okay, so actually, let me go back to my pivot table. And so the chart has been removed from here. And now I'm back to my regular pivot table. Okay, one thing that I'd like to do, a couple of things that I'd like to do, but I'm running out of time. Oh, this is really important, the value field settings. So the value fields are typically displayed, as we saw, as sums and averages and so forth. But sometimes you want to display them as percentages, which is a very interesting way of looking at them. So again, if I right mouse click on my information, I can go into either value field settings where I can make that choice, or show values as, look at this. Let's hang in here for a second. Look at this, show values as a percentage of the grand total, a percentage of the column total, percentage of the row total, or any of these other items. I'm going to say a percentage of the grand total. And so it's calculating these percentages. And sometimes that is really an amazing thing. Can you do a stacked bar chart that showing the percentage from each country in particular region? Well, sure, you could. This probably has changed. This has changed so that now it is a percentage, that's showing percentage rather than values. And what you really need to do is change the chart type that you've got into a stacked chart type. I don't really have time to do that right now because I am totally out of time. Okay, let's see. Is anybody else asking questions? Can you also include the database with the slides and the video? I can do that. I will not save the changes when I close this. So you're going to get the raw data again that you can play with, and you'll be able to follow along with me if you'd like. So that's a good suggestion. I will do that. Database. Okay. Okay. Good. Oh, somebody's offering to help with 1 or 2 hours of Excel. One-on-one, 2-hour minimum. Good for you, Kim. By the time you travel to a client, you betcha it's a 2-hour minimum. Okay. So any other questions about either the data file? 10 new messages. Goodness. Thank you. Awesome. One of the best. Thank you, Kevin. Awesome. One of the best. Will we be sent the presentation and video link, or do we have to request them? Okay, Mark, here's what you're going to be getting. Everybody, this is what you're going to be getting. You will be getting in the same email a link to the video. You will also be getting the PDF of my slides. And though you haven't seen my slides, trust me, my slides are all about the topics that we talked about. And the third thing that we just agreed to do is you're going to get this data file, this Excel file. And so you'll be able to look at the video and walk along with it. You'll be able to pause the video and hopefully you'll be able to really learn how to do this, because, you know, I know from my 30 years of teaching that it's not enough to see it, that you actually have to do it yourself. And so it's very important that you commit to, after this webinar, going back and watching the video and walking along with it, or you're not going to be implementing this, and it will be, you know, not a waste of your time, hopefully, but that you will get more out of it. I'm going to, again, copy the, I'm going to paste the information about next week's webinar, how to register for next week's webinar, which is 15 mind-blowing Excel tips. Yeah, as I told you, as I was putting that PowerPoint together, I think I've got about 20 of them now. And will they all blow your mind? I hope not. But it's something that I hope you enjoy. And here's a link to the last webinar that I gave, which was much more on using Excel to analyze your data. And we created a lot more columns and formatted and did all kinds of great stuff. So I hope that you would consider doing that. You do not use the information, you will forget it. Absolutely. Faustine must have experienced this and then get confused when you get back. How will we get this data file to try the lessons? Oh, David, it's going to be in the email that we're sending you. To get the links in the chat, you need to click on them, then copy the web address. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, Faustine. So hopefully you had enough time to copy that, or go to our website, which is minnesota.score.org. And there you can put in my name, McKeever, M-C-K-E-E-V-E-R, and it will identify for you all of the webinars, both upcoming and past webinars that I have. Thank you. You know, we are not in charge of the settings. It is SCORE and SCORE National, and they have not implemented that. So sorry about that. Okay, I'm out. It is time. You will be getting the video. Again, you'll be getting the video, you'll be getting the slides, and you'll be getting a copy of this Excel document in its unformatted original state. And so you can play with it as you will. All right, well, if you're interested in having a mentor, please consider going to minnesota.score.org. There's a button to apply for a mentor. We're here waiting to help you, and it would be really great to hear what your business idea is and to help you realize that plan. If you have any, you will be getting not only that email that I talked about, but you'll also be getting a link to evaluate this webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you think that it was worthwhile. I hope that you would give me a 9 or a 10. That's what my goal is for it. But if you have any ideas for upcoming 20, thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. You're my new best friend. If you have any ideas for upcoming webinars, I am the education chair and I put all of these webinars together. So I would love to help you come up with tasks that would help you in your business. So I thank you all for coming, and that's it. Hope to see you all next week, and we'll learn some more awesome, mind-blowing tips. Faustine will be practicing. Good for you. All right. Kimberly is going to be here. I hope you all are. Thank you so much for coming. Bye-bye, all.